You're listening to the Colts Blue Zone podcast with Mike Chappell and Dave Griffiths.
Inside the Fox 59 CBS 4 podcast studio, welcome to the Colts Blue Zone podcast. Alongside Mike Chappell, I'm Dave Griffiths. Our fearless producer, Matt Adams, getting some well-deserved R&R as this new year begins. So honestly, I hope that we're recording, and I hope this goes out eventually one day. Who knows, Chap? We could be talking into the ether right now.
So you don't have a lot of confidence in your job?
I make no assurances that I'm doing it correctly, but I see.
This is one of those where sometimes you don't really appreciate Matt until he's not here.
Exactly.
And we'll get done talking for an hour, and then there will be nothing there.
I see levels, so that's a good sign.
All right.
I see mine are a little bit higher than yours because I talk loudly.
Just don't waste my next 50 minutes, okay? We've all got expiration dates.
Right.
Mine's quicker than yours.
Well, the expiration date to the Colts 2024 season has come and gone. They finished the year 8-9, and will run it back in 2025, almost entirely. After the Colts ended up beating the Jaguars in overtime, 26-23, to wrap up the season, Jim Irsay fairly quickly sent out a post on Twitter that night on Sunday, and it said the following: "Dear Colts fans, as we close out this season, I can't tell you how disappointed I am that we failed to win the AFC South and earn a playoff appearance. There's a high standard in this city for our team and anyone who steps on the field wearing the horseshoe. The expectation is to win our division and compete for championships. Just being on the doorstep of the playoffs is not the standard I expect, nor what you deserve. We understand that and always accept the challenge. Believe me, I know you share my impatience and frustration. I know you invest your time, energy, and money into the Colts every year. More than anything, we want to reward you with division titles and playoff runs, and we've fallen short in the most painful ways possible." So after that, you're reading this.
This is called burying the lead.
Exactly. You're reading all this, and you're thinking, okay, yeah, well, I'm on board with everything if you're a Colts fan, everything that's been said so far. So you're making changes, right, Jim? Let's continue.
That's a nice lead. It was a nice break and a nice lead in. Go ahead.
Thank you. But things evolve quickly in the NFL from week to week and season to season. So I will never stop being optimistic that this team can take the next step. I've been evaluating our entire operation, and I believe in Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen and our collective ability to make the improvements needed to take us to the next level in 2025. I know fans who want an immediate change in leadership will be disappointed. That means we all have a lot to prove. So we'll get back to work and keep doing what we can to earn your support and make you proud to be a Colts fan.
Disappointed is an understatement in what the fan base reaction was. Is.
To be fair, you gave him a pretty fair warning last week. If you're listening here to the Colts Blue Zone podcast, Mike Chappell didn't guarantee that Chris Ballard and Shane Steichen were coming back, but everything that you said last week and everything that we kind of analyzed was basically on that front, because you felt through your reporting and your relationships that this was the most likely outcome that would happen, and it is the outcome that Colts fans got.
Yeah, and I don't know if another Giants game would have altered that. I don't think so. But all I would say is, when they drafted Anthony Richardson, 4th overall in 23, they essentially tied Richardson, Steichen, and Ballard together.
Right.
It's going to work or it's not. And there wasn't any, and it's 2025 or bust. But how else do you read what's going on here? Is they either succeed next year, and whatever that term succeed is, I don't know. I would think playoffs. You think playoffs.
Right.
I just don't think that they can sit here next year and say, boy, we came close in a play here. So it seems like it's next year. There better be something. And obviously, if you take the temperature of the Colts fans and the media and all that, it's is it 2080 in favor of doing this? Is it 1090?
Right.
And I understand it. I'm a really good writer. I went to college to write, and I'm a great BSer. I can write stuff that I don't believe, and this is one that it's hard to say they're running it back and this is why it's a good idea.
Mhm.
I just don't know how you do it. And we'll get into it because I think this is all that matters is to the most extent, I don't care who the coach is. I don't care who the GM is. If the quarterback doesn't work, you are not going to succeed. You're not. Give Bill Polian and Tony Dungy Ryan Leaf. And what do you got? So, and again, this is one that everybody was in on Richardson. Now, that's who, maybe you wanted Stroud or probably not Bryce, probably Stroud with Frank. But at 4, you took Richardson. And I remember Jim Irsay saying, if we'd had the first overall pick, we would have taken Richardson. And I don't believe that. But this is your guy. And there's reasons and excuses, whatever. The bottom line is what is it? What is Shane, 17-17?
Yep, dead even. 9-8 last year, 8-9 this year.
And yes, they had chances and a lot better chances last year to sneak in with Gardner Minshew, not Anthony Richardson.
Right.
So I feel the fan base's angst and anger. The fan base isn't disappointed; they're PO'd. They don't agree with this. But I don't know how. The only other option in my mind, and we talked about it, was blowing it up, tearing it down to the studs.
Right.
You don't fire the GM and keep the quarterback and the coach and tell your new GM, oh, by the way, here's your.
You're coming into this. These are your guys.
So, and the fans probably would have been okay with that, with blowing it up.
Mm-hmm.
But here's where we are, and you can bitch and moan all you want. We're going to talk to Chris Ballard probably Friday. He's under the weather, so that his presser was pushed back from Wednesday, and he has some very, very difficult questions to answer. He does.
It's on you and me, chap, to hold them accountable, at least according to all the people on Twitter. We've got to hold their feet to the fire.
Why don't you guys ask difficult questions? We do, and
he doesn't answer the way you want. That's the problem.
Right. And Shane Steichen does not. I think one thing that Shane must learn from this season, because last season was pretty uneventful. I mean, were there any major things last year that I'm missing? This year there were. There was a benching, there was this, that, and the other, and the tap out, and the back spasms. He was very sore. I think he needs to really, really do better on his delivery and in his message. He did his quarterback a great disservice by saying he was very sore. He had back spasms, and an MRI showed he has a disc issue, whatever you put it. And that's what he needs to do. And I think he will. I mean, this was the first time, if I remember, that he's ever been a head coach these 2 years. So it's just totally different being a position coach or a coordinator to being a head coach, because you are the face of the franchise.
Correct.
You are the voice of the franchise. We only get the GM a couple times a year, 3 or 4 times a year. You're the guy that's up there 3 times a week, 4 times a week. So we'll see where it goes. But yeah, I'm less than optimistic this is going to work.
It does rest on Richardson, and that's the thing. Like we talked about last week, blowing things up would necessitate giving up on Anthony Richardson,
without a doubt.
And Jim Irsay / the franchise is not ready to do that yet.
I don't think they should.
Right.
He's 22. Again, we'll use this a few more weeks, but he's 22 and he started 15 games.
And you could say that that's a problem.
No question.
And it is a problem. 15 and a possible 34 in his 2 years.
With a 2-game benching.
And a benching.
So 17.
So
he's been available for just 15 games. Right.
And multiple injuries. Where was the concussion last year? There was the shoulder. And then this year, there was the back. And there were
hip,
oblique, whatever they wanted to call it, getting railed from kind of this behind / the side as he got hit in that Steelers game. So it's been a lot of things. It's not just been one problem, which might concern you if it was one problem too. But it's also concerning that there's one thing after another after another. And here's the deal with that: you are injury prone until you can prove you're not. I remember, chap, 2 years ago, or 2.5 years ago, whatever it was, when we were talking in the offseason leading up to the Colts drafting Anthony Richardson in 23, I guess, so almost 2 years ago. Like you're going through who do you want at quarterback for the Colts? And the number one option out there was Lamar Jackson.
Right.
And at the time, he was injury prone.
Right.
He had started like 8-10 games in each of the past 2 seasons. And what has he done the last 2 years? He's started every game.
Level.
He's played at MVP level, and he's been out there consistently and doing as well as any other quarterback in the NFL. So that's not for me to say Anthony Richardson is going to be Lamar Jackson. What I'm saying is when he's healthy, then you get to see who he is, who he actually is. And just because a player is going through injuries over the course of 2 years doesn't mean that that's going to be the way that things happen the rest of their career. So you need to be patient with guys who have these injuries, and especially when they have the physical tools that Anthony Richardson has.
That's what you keep coming back to, is 6'5", 250, and no one can argue with the dynamic presence he is as a runner in this offense. He is. If he can play
a lot of ifs.
15 games, 16 games, he's going to give you 700 yards and 10 touchdowns, 12 touchdowns. The passing game, it's just not there. But like you said, the fact that he's played 15 games, that's part of the evaluation process. And that's part of the reason that his development has been impeded, without question. I mean, he should have been working on his game as a playing quarterback last offseason, but no, he's rehabbing
an injury, right?
So I
can't throw until April or whenever it was.
Right,
yeah.
and that matters. It matters, and that's why this offseason has got to be about. Hey, take your 2 or 3 weeks. Take a month. A month sounds too long. Take 2 or 3 weeks. Decompress, and then hit it. And then hit it. Whether it's in Jacksonville, whether it's here, whether it's with Tom House.
I was about to say, get Tom House on speed dial, or some other guy, Jordan Palmer.
And
I don't care.
on it, work at it. This is now your profession, and you're one of the top. You're perceived as one of the top 32 in this profession, and they're paying you a good bunch of money. And if you're the guy, if the light goes on and you're the guy, in 2 years, you're going to make $60 million a year. That's what the market's going to be. But I think part of the problem, and pardon me for ramming and going up and backing up, I think one of the big problems from the start is there has been a sense of entitlement. And remember, they just gave him they named him the starter after the first preseason game as a rookie. They named him a captain. They named him a captain before he played a game. So much was given to him. And this at the time was a 21-year-old kid who wouldn't be overwhelmed.
You're not ready to lead a group of 53/63 or 70 with practice squad men at that level. But you're also trying to learn everything else that he's trying to learn at this point as a developmental QB.
And what's wrong is we compare him to Peyton Manning. You can't. There's one Manning. And don't give me the Brady. There's one Peyton Manning when it comes to knowing what it takes to be that guy. Because he was that guy from high school, and he did it the right way from high school. So, but that doesn't keep Richardson from being accountable to understanding what it takes. And we got bits and pieces from talking to players. And I remember Ryan Kelly at some point during the season. He said, you have to understand what it takes, and when players have Tuesdays off, sort of, you're supposed to be here. And he was talking about the quarterback, and he was talking about Richardson. So as much as the injuries were a concern again this year and the passing and all that stuff, my biggest takeaway is that he had to be benched for 2 games because he didn't get it. And that's, you can, to some degree, fix the footwork and fix how you play quarterback and fix the decision-making because he's still such a young player. I don't know how you fix someone's approach to their job. It seems like you either get it or you don't. Now, maybe again, this is a maturity thing, and hopefully the light went on. It's pretty bad to me that you had to flip the light because that should be understood. But how, as a coaching staff and Ballard and all these guys, do you impress upon him that this is what it takes? And they had to bench him for 2 games because, and that's an indictment of him, and it's an indictment of the team. You enabled this to go on for a year and a half. At some level, you did.
You're
So,
making a lot of points to blow it up, Mike, right now.
that's what I'm saying. As much as a good BSer I am, I couldn't sit in front of my computer and say, Jim Irsay, way to go. This is what you should do. I've tried not to be one to call for people's jobs. I just don't. I'm not wired that way. I'm not a columnist. I was always a beat writer. You sort of write what you see and write the facts, and then let people sort of make their own opinions, and people do. You're more outspoken than I am. That's just the way we're wired. But it's hard. It's hard. Like I say, it's hard to say this was a good idea because, and then I couldn't give 10 reasons, let alone 5, other than, well, you can't give up on a 22-year-old quarterback. And if he works, then the coach and the GM work. So, but this is where we are. And when we see Richardson out there in April or May for OTAs, whatever it is, June, if we see the same inaccuracies, sailing one over a guy but make the great throw down the field and all that, then they've got a problem. I think they've got a problem anyway.
Right.
But then you've really got a problem because then what was he doing for 2 or 3 months to get to that point?
There is no more being enamored with his physical skills after this. Like, we've seen them. We know what they are. You need to not complete 47.7% of your passes, or you need to do that, but do a lot better. You know what I mean?
I told you I'm a stat nut. I spend way too much time on stats, but I went back and looked. He's at 50.6 for 2 years, 348 passes,
over 500.
Right. Well, there you go. There you go. Well, he's a 5, and he's played in half the games.
Exactly. There you go.
Or he's missed half the games. But over the last 2 years, there have been 38 quarterbacks have attempted at least 348 passes, and he is number 48 at 50.6. And the next worst guy is Bryce Young at like 59%. So I went back and looked, and Richardson could start next year 80 for 80. 80 for 80, and barely get above Bryce Young. So it's a problem. That's why I've probably been wrong, but I wonder how difficult or how inaccurate it is to criticize Shane Steichen when he can't trust his quarterback to complete a 6-yard pass on first down to get 2nd and 4. Again, I think we got enamored with all the great deep throws early in the season, and then he was still missing guys, just flat and missing them. And were there drop passes? Yes, that contributed to the 47-7, but not that much.
Right.
I mean, give him 20 more completions, 20 for 20 on the drops, and there weren't 20 drops.
No.
He's still not 50%. So that's on him. It's on them. Whether they change some assistant coaches to give him better teaching, better leadership. One of the most important people during the Peyton Manning years, one was Tom Moore, because Tom Moore is a Hall of Fame level coordinator. But Jim Caldwell, as a quarterback's coach, he held Peyton's feet to the fire. Peyton always said, that I understand that when November, December get here, I'm going to get lazy on my mechanics. Get on me about it. They need somebody to hold the quarterback down and say, this is how you're doing. This is what you're not doing. This is what you need to do. And again, the only way this succeeds is if the quarterback improves by light years, it seems.
And I think that, like, the things you're bringing up are accountability things. Right. And that's supposed to be one of the pillars of Shane Steichen's approach. And the fact that we keep coming back to it is concerning, I think. And that's what's concerning a lot of fans out there, that, like, why are we talking about accountability things at all? Like, it should be about ability, not accountability.
Right. DeForest Buckner kind of went off on that when we talked to him earlier this week. He went to the egos, where the defense had too many egos, and you can make your own judgment on who he was talking at. But he was also talking about accountability. And if you don't have accountability from the quarterback, then what do you got? even when Manning was a rookie and they go 3-13, it ate at him every week that they weren't winning and that he was part of the losing because of he was a rookie. I just never got that vibe from Anthony Richardson, and it's really risky to read between the lines and body language and all that stuff. When we talked to him Monday, I just came away not thinking, okay, boy, the light went on. This guy's going to attack it in the offseason. I need to see it. I've given too much, I guess, blind faith.
Benefit of the doubt.
I need to see it.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way we're going to do that is in practice and OTAs and in training camp.
And if Richardson is coming back, if you're not ready to give up on Richardson, which Jim Irsay clearly is not, Shane Steichen needed to come back, in my opinion, because you don't want to give him a different offense, a different coordinator, a different voice in his ear for his third.
You blow it up or you don't.
Exactly.
Correct.
Like it's not giving him something different would be a disaster, in my opinion, to try to start from scratch in terms of an offense and figuring out what he's supposed to be doing on a play-by-play, on a day-by-day basis, what his expectations are in this offense and what verbiage is and different calls and whatever. Like give him the chance to improve within this offense. And I've used the two examples on this podcast before for development of young quarterbacks with similar skill sets in Josh Allen and Jalen Hurts. In the third year for both of those guys, the Bills went out and got Stephon Diggs. The Eagles went out and got A.J. Brown. Like they went into year 3 with no excuses. Like they're going to be like, Josh, Jalen, if you can't succeed this guy as your number one,
this is a you problem.
This is a you problem.
Right.
And Michael Pittman Jr. played this year with a broken back. Credit to him, man. What a freaking warrior.
You just knew.
Yeah, you knew he was wrong.
At the end of the season, he was going to say, yeah, I had.
Exactly.
And we were sort of joking about
the
it.
The whole year we knew it.
It's kind of like, remember when Vinny had the bad year?
Yeah, in 19.
The kid said, no, he's fine. He's fine. And he had a bad knee.
And we knew he wasn't fine.
Right.
But I know why he's saying he's fine.
Right. But when I thought, we all thought this thing started like was it week 5 or whatever it was against Tennessee?
Right.
That's when he started, I think, being on the injury report.
Right.
He said this thing cropped up
preseason
in the joint practice with Arizona.
Right.
And he said a scan. I'd have to go back and look. Either a scan at that time, or the follow-up one showed, what do you call it, a fracture thing?
Mm-hmm. A fracture thing.
A little fracture thing, or whatever it was.
Fracture thing.
Which if you
it's like a little disc thing.
If you got a fracture, you got a fracture. But he played with it, and he also said like that.
Doc said it was going to get worse over time.
Something could get better. Well, of course
it doesn't get better. Yeah, obviously you're playing football.
Somebody's hitting you with a hammer on your back like 20 times a game. So, but I've argued that Pitt is really good, and you might want something a little better. And I'm not saying Jamar Chase. I'm not saying Justin Jefferson, because those guys are elite, and you just don't. But you need.
It's hard to pick them out, man. Like still the Eagles getting A.J. Brown is the most confusing trade to me. Maybe that I've seen in my life.
And Tennessee's a mess.
Certainly within the past decade. Yes, they are an absolute mess.
Right. That same year, the different level because of the player, but Baltimore gave up on Hollywood Brown.
They did.
Because they didn't want to pay what it was going to cost. So I don't know what that means. One of the things that will be brought up when we talk to Chris Ballard is we understand your core beliefs, offensive line, defensive line. We understand that. But there's got to be some kind of a mandate. I mean, we've had mandates here before, to where
all chips in.
You're gonna be active in free agency, and I'm not talking Joe Flacco and Raekwon Davis. I'm talking 3 or 4 players, plug and play. Tight end,
huge.
I mean,
huge one.
They weren't in position to get Brock Bowers. Did they try to move up a couple spots? What did Bowers go 12 or 13?
Yeah, I believe it was 13. I think he was 2 before.
A couple spots ahead.
So the Colts picked 15th last year. I think
right.
They picked 14th next year.
Correct.
Right now.
So you're in that. You're sort of in no man's land.
Yeah.
Sort of. And Bowers went out there and just got like 113 catches, and he was the best player the Raiders had on a crappy team. But and then your tight end group was one of the least productive in years here, and one of the worst in the league. We looked at, was it Cotting Ranson had 180 some yards? It was 48th individually in the league. That's just, you can't do that. And Steichen loves to use tight ends. Couldn't do it. So that's, you've got to give the quarterback more. I thought this was a good receiver group. No, I think the top three guys played pretty well. Pittman, Josh Downs is it the most catches in 2 years now?
In the first 2 years in Colts history.
He
passed Marvin.
Marvin,
140 catches in 2 years.
So now Marvin's career then took off.
I mean, Marvin caught 140 in 1 year. Eventually.
Right. So, but and then Alec Pierce, I know some people still think they didn't call him a bust, but they said, hey, that wasn't that great of a season. No,
this was like where would you have been without Alec Pierce this year, man?
And if you've got a 1 and a 2 that give you, yes, you want more from the 1, but he was hurt. And my concern is we've sort of seen the ceiling with Pittman.
Right. I think so.
With what he can do, he's never going to be the burner deep guy, but doggone it, he's going to play. He's going to give you 90 catches and 1,200 yards and 4 touchdowns, and then Downs is going to give you what he gives you. Would it be great to have drop an A.J. Brown in there? Yes, but I mean, okay, then T. Higgins.
Right.
Are you going to pay, what is it, $35 million? $30 million?
It's expensive, man.
Now, you could argue that's what they need to do.
Mm-hmm. You definitely can.
And I would argue that Chris Ballard has never done that, ever. I think his best free agent, his most expensive free agent guy has been Devin Funchess.
That's right. Like 1 year, $10 million.
And he got hurt in the opener.
Yeah, boy, terrible.
San Diego, I think it was.
Yeah.
So, but that's what you're going to pay. But you've got to bring in. You got to have a corner. You got to have a safety. Not knowing Braden Smith's situation. Hopefully, Chris Ballard gives us an update. So there's 4 or 5 spots that just jump out at you. Backup running back, for crying out loud.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why the draft cannot be the draft. You've got to bring in 3 or 4 guys. Again, not lower level guys. I'm talking guys that can play and compete. And one of them has got to be a quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
I want to see what the market is. You cannot go into next training camp and say it's AR's job. Can't do it. It's got to be an open competition, and that depends on bringing in a guy who you believe can compete.
Push him.
Justin Fields, I don't know. I don't know who's going to be out there. Sam Darnold won't be out there.
No.
At very least, they'll franchise him. So I just don't know how fertile the environment's going to be for a veteran quarterback. Russell Wilson, whatever Pittsburgh does. I mean, really? There we go. Aaron Rodgers.
Jeff's blowing up.
Aaron Rodgers, really? I mean,
got a Schefter situation over here. You got to take a call in the middle of your hit.
I think that's probably my wife saying she got home from work okay.
Good.
So I just that's the and that was a problem in blowing it up. It's very easy to get rid of the GM, to get rid of the coach, and get rid of the quarterback, and then I would argue you could replace the head coach and the GM. What was your plan B at quarterback? If you're going to blow it up, who? I mean, because you don't know. First, you don't know who's going to be out there. You're not in position to draft a quarterback in a very weak quarterback market. Cam Ward, are you sure he's going to be a guy? I don't know. Sanders, I'd hate to have the first pick, Tennessee.
If you needed a quarterback,
and you need a quarterback.
Maybe somebody falls in love with him like the Broncos fell in love with Bo Nix this past year.
And that worked.
Exactly. It worked darn well for them.
Because you had Sean Payton.
Mm-hmm. That's right.
So that's the problem. But doggone it, you've got to have somebody. And I'm not talking bringing in Joe Flacco back. I thought Joe Flacco played okay. He played okay.
I thought he did everything you would expect of a 39-year-old quarterback.
Right. He played kind of like how he did in Cleveland. Pretty good early, and then the longer he played,
The thing is, in Cleveland, when he was 4-1, he was throwing to Amari Cooper.
Right.
And David Njoku.
He had like 8 interceptions in Cleveland.
He did.
He had interceptions.
Yes, he definitely did. But like in here, he was throwing to like Josh Downs, who I think is a pretty good young player, but not the downfield threat that those guys are, and not the consistent. Like you have a consistent guy in Njoku who can get those yards, and also the downfield guy in Amari Cooper. Not and Cooper is not Alec Pierce. Like Alec Pierce is not the same thing as those two. And then Michael Pittman was hurt, so like you had different people that you were throwing to, and I think that the level you went down a level. You just did when you came here to Indianapolis in terms of your weapons.
So you're asking him to do more than he
with less,
was capable, that he's capable of doing with less,
right?
So yeah, that's and again, yes, they need to have a tight end who is a player. Yes, they need this, that, and the other. But they need a quarterback to come in here to where you think, Jameis Winston. I don't know but those are the names you're going to get,
right?
And that's what you've got to have, and it's got to be legit competition.
Mm-hmm.
And if Richardson wins it, he's got to understand. Now, listen, you have a couple bad games, we'll get away from you.
If you want a quarterback to come in and be the adult in the room and show maturity, I don't know if Jameis Winston is the right one for you here, first of all. It would be fun. Like, look, I covered him in Tallahassee. He was otherworldly as a quarterback back in college. Won the Heisman, won Florida State a national championship. He's never been accused of being the adult in the room.
Right.
And it's worked wonders for him in his role. It really has. But I'm just saying, like, I don't want to chop him off at the knees as a person. I want to say that would be a scenario that maybe, based on what we've seen from Anthony Richardson this past year with the Colts, you might want to think twice about. And I'll leave it at that.
Right. Because you need, again, Joe Flacco made it very clear that he wasn't brought in here to be a tutor.
Right.
It wasn't. He sort of, a mentor. He sort of said, nah, he didn't say it, but he wasn't the quarterback coach.
Right.
I'm going to do my job, and sort of he can watch how I do it, sort of. So again, you've got to have somebody. This is going to sound terrible, but you need to have somebody like a Gardner Minshew.
Bring him back, run it back.
That's the level. That's the level you're going to get, unless there's just somebody out there that Baker Mayfield would be great, and he's a good. The reinventing himself guy.
He's a playoff quarterback in Tampa Bay.
You're not going to get that. But that's the level of quarterback you're going to probably get.
How about the backup to the current 2-time Super Bowl champions that might be going back to the Super Bowl sometime? Maybe that guy.
Let's not mention his name.
Okay.
CW.
Yeah, that dude.
He'll be out there, but again,
he's still playing.
You're making my point.
Yeah, I know.
That's
the level.
That's the level you're going to get.
Yes, it is.
But that's the level, doggone it, that you better have. That should be the floor of the competition.
Daniel Jones.
Wow.
Like all these names that you throw out there, they all make you go, ugh. Like every name.
Trey Lance.
Like, ugh.
Well, I know. There you go. We're making our point.
Right.
That you're not going to have a Sam Darnold out there like the Viking did last year. And so that's the problem. But you cannot continue to simply say he's our quarterback because doggone it, he was the fourth pick and he's our quarterback. Can't do it. I go back to, again, they gave him the captain's letter before you'd done anything. And I'll mention it one more time and then I'll quit beating this part of it. He was benched for 2 games because he didn't get it. And that's why you've got to really make him work for whatever he gets going forward.
And I'll come back to if the Bills and the Eagles went with Stephon Diggs and AJ Brown, maybe the Colts go in a different direction, but a similar direction in terms of like no excuses year. The Operation No Excuses 2025. Like if Anthony Richardson is having difficulty with short and intermediate passes, spend money or draft capital getting a tight end. Like a good one,
no question.
like an AJ Brown or Stephon Diggs level tight end.
The 1 year we saw from Eric Ebron, type of thing. I mean, for 1 year, it was pretty good.
I would say running back too, because Jonathan Taylor has proven this year that he's not the best at catching the football.
Right.
But Taylor's going to be your running back for 300 carries again next year. So if you just go out and get a running back, that's not going to add the same level. Like you can add a Nyheim Hines, you're not going to get you're going to get someone who catches 50 balls maybe, but you don't want to take Taylor off the field. That's the problem. Right. So you put a guy on the field. So it's got to be like in my opinion, what makes sense is for them to invest significantly. Like I said, draft capital or payment or both.
You could get the best tight end in the draft at 14.
Yes, I think you can. Like a guy like a Ty Warren out of Penn State, or there's a couple others. There's one out of like Bowling Green.
I'm not in my draft mode yet, but
yes,
that again, Steichen has almost always had a quality tight end.
And then one out of Michigan as well, a kid at Michigan. I forget his name.
And I go back to what Dallas Clark was kind of seen as the missing piece in a really good offense. But they just never had that tight end threat,
right?
And it just limits what you can do. Is it okay to get a tight end at 14 and say, okay, there, we did it? Or do you still, if you do that, I still think you go out and then you get a mid-level. Maybe you lower your goal in free agency for a tight end. You don't try to get the best one. You just get a good complimentary piece. But it's got to be better than. Remember they got Trey Burton a couple years ago,
correct,
from Philly, and just didn't really do much. And so that's yes. Now I think there's more of a chance of getting a tight end that sort of makes you. I like that, as opposed to T. Higgins,
right?
That type of guy. I just don't know that they would be able to suck it up and say, because it's going to take $30 million minimum,
right,
to get T. Higgins,
right.
He knows the market, and that this is when you strike. So, and you got Pitt on a pretty darn good big contract. So yeah, the takeaway is they need another legit weapon offensively. Because again, if you're all in on the quarterback, give him everything you can to help it.
That's where Operation No Excuses 2025 begins, is giving Anthony Richardson no excuses to succeed.
And then making sure the offensive line is at the accepted level, because like you mentioned before the air, there's a chance they'll be without the right side of their line.
Yep. Who knows what's up with Braden Smith right now? We'll hopefully get a little bit more information.
And I tell you, I know Braden since he's been here. No better people walking the earth than Braden Smith. But he's got something's going on.
It's a funny story with our own one of our sports anchors saw him out one day, like at a mall or something. Him and his wife, who of course went to Auburn, right? And his wife played softball at Auburn too.
We talked him on draft day.
Famously,
they were at a tournament game or something.
A softball tournament game. But,
best interview that he's ever given us.
But yeah, walked up behind him in the mall and said something, or was behind him and said something like "Roll Tide," and like he was all ticked off for a second, and then they got to talking. Of course, they realized it was funny, and his wife was like, "I told you it was a joke."
Right.
But that was like, that's as mad as probably you'll see Braden Smith get, is somebody saying "Roll Tide" to him when he's out in the just out in life somewhere.
Right.
So say War Eagle, and that'll get him to.
But
to smile
you simply
instead.
don't know.
Right.
You don't know.
No, you don't
now.
now.
At right guard, you don't know. Will Fries was playing at a Pro Bowl level.
He was playing great,
and he breaks his leg.
Yep.
He'll be a free agent. You probably bring him back at a prove it
at
1
Tyquan
year.
Lewis.
Yes,
prove it
2 or 3 million, whatever it was.
Mm-hmm.
And at center, I did a story yesterday on Ryan Kelly.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think he's back. I mean, I don't think
he has not acted like it. He has not acted like he's coming back.
He was a little bit disappointed, and probably stronger than that they didn't even try to extend him last year when they gave out $160 million in guarantees to
a lot of their own
8 or 9 or 10 players, the
guys they had built over the past 5-10 years, again, like him, right?
Right.
Yeah.
But they've drafted for the future, looking with Tanner Bornolini,
right,
and then Matt Gonzalez.
That's right.
Did I get that right?
Yes, you did. Good job, chap.
It's so hard because whenever I write it, it's hard to start that with a G.
There's a trouble, like in the press box this week, the guy who's the press box announcer was kind of did like a double take at it as he's announcing his name with a concussion. Same thing.
But he's your right tackle of the future. Braden, I think, is signed through next year.
Mm-hmm.
And Quentin's going to be here till he's 50 and play high. And Bernard Ryman, you're going to have to pay him.
He's entering the last year of his contract.
Right.
You want to extend him?
He's not going to get,
$20 million
premier left tackle money,
but 20 isn't premier anymore. It's
no,
25, 30.
No, you're right. So whenever we talk about the expensive receiver or a tight end, that you got a few of your own that you do have to take care of.
Mm-hmm.
We haven't even talked about the free agent list. There's probably 12 or 15 guys there.
Yeah, we'll get to that eventually.
And if you don't
not today,
if you don't sign any of them, okay,
right?
Dio, you do, but we'll see. But again, it goes back to options for the quarterback in the passing game and all this, and protecting up front. So, like you said, everything you do has almost to the point of not ignoring the defense, because you can't. But you've got to make sure that this offense has every chance to succeed.
Well, about the defense, that is the place where the Colts are changing entering next year. Since
no
you bring
surprise, and I'm telling you, Gus is one of the best people. Again, he is, and they did him no favors. But it didn't for 3 years. It did not work.
Gus Bradley is fired as Colts defensive coordinator.
He may have been let go. His contract might have expired. Might have been a 3-year contract.
Jointly agreed that he was
mutually agreed to part ways. Well,
they
said they parted ways with.
Yeah. Okay. So yes, that's the official verbiage from the Colts, is they parted ways with Gus Bradley. Jim Irsay tweeted out, "Gus Bradley is one of the classiest men in pro football, and we will miss him. He will land on his feet, and I expect soon," which is all true.
Right.
He is one of the classiest men.
I mean, he's not done, and he's
no.
Again, I just always enjoyed our time on Zoom with him.
He was like everything that Shane Steichen is not as a communicator.
Messenger?
He is.
Yes.
He has that down pat, and he's had the chance to do that over his career. He was head coach of Jacksonville for a couple of years, of course, and before that was the defensive coordinator of the Legion of Boom there in Seattle, and stops along the way. Now he's here. So
we'll see where that goes. And it can't be a super.
We're not here anymore.
Right. It can't. It's got to be a different scheme and all that. But they're not going to go 3-4.
You don't think so?
They haven't got the personnel.
Right. That's the problem.
You don't have a lot of linebackers anyway.
Mm-hmm.
So, but it's got to change. It's got to be a different approach, a different philosophy on how you do things.
I was going to say, do you really have to reconsider philosophy, or do you want to do some things just a little bit better? Because Shane Steichen, I mean, he's the guy who's kind of in charge ultimately, with Chris Ballard with significant influence himself as well in that area. But what it has been here under both Matt Eberflus and Gus Bradley is bend but don't break, try to make the big play.
And not give up the big plays, like you said.
And it was better under Eberflus because you had
he's available. Out there.
Because you had a guy named Darius Leonard at the time who was the best in the world at what he was doing.
That was a case of where they sort of bent the defense around to the talent.
Right.
I think Shaq probably was allowed to freelance a little bit, if that's the right word.
Mm-hmm.
But then other players didn't play well for Flus. Zaire Franklin
famously is not a fan.
Is not a fan. Again, it was there was just too much that went on defensively, and that's where I mentioned that DeForest Buckner mentioned. We said, why did it sort of? He said, well, egos. He didn't even let Joel Erickson get the question out before he was done. He said, ego, and there was just too many me first guys, and that it doesn't work.
That's a killer, man.
It is. But and again, I don't think they did Gus a world of good by not giving him a veteran presence in the secondary, the Stephen Gilmore type of guy. Because now we've invested in these young guys, and that was 2 years. 2 years of playing young guys, and one of them that you invested in was Juju Brents, the Warren Central kid.
One of the biggest disappointments of the past 2 years. And not as a person.
No.
Not as like what he's done on the field, but by not being on the field. Man, just so disappointing.
We've gotten all over Richardson, and rightly so, about not playing. Brents has missed more games.
He has, yes.
And he gets back this past game from knee surgery.
He gets hurt in the first quarter, man.
He played 6 plays.
Golly.
And you just want to think, and again, it's hard to say, well, boy, next year he's gotten all this injury out of his system. You can't take that approach.
Plan on that. Yeah,
you can't plan it. You got to plan on having you can't plan on injuries, but you can't plan on him being the guy without question because of the injury factor. So they could have again this defense. They lost Samson Ebukam in late August. Your best sack guy. So and what kind of a year did Latu have?
4 sacks, 3 forced fumbles.
I thought he wore down
32 tackles. I think something like that.
I think when you talk about the rookie wall,
he hit it,
and rightly so. I mean,
his production seemed to indicate
he goes from college to training for the combine to going right into it. So I understand
he could use 2 or 3 weeks off right now.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but it just not enough. Just not enough difference-making talent. Stephen Holder pointed out that they had the highest-paid defensive line in the league, the most money invested in the defensive line.
Really?
Well, I mean, remember they gave Buck the extension.
I think that could be like I like Stephen. I'm not poo-pooing his stat. It might be a little misleading because some teams with the 3-4, it's the outside linebacker, like a TJ Watt.
Right.
That is really more of a defensive lineman. But I understand his point.
And those teams almost have 5 linemen with 2 outside linebackers.
Yes, that's fair. Yes.
But you're right. But again, the thing is they extended Buck, which I would still love to sit down and talk to him about. What the hell were you thinking? But and then they extended Grover. Did they extend Grover? Or was his contract?
His contract was up. He was a free agent. Well, he would have been a free agent.
Tyquan Lewis they signed. So and then they were awful against the run, just awful. Was it 474 yards the first 2 games?
Yeah.
So there was very little chance Gus was coming back. And I don't know there'll be that much personnel change defensively with the new guy. He'll need to.
And he's get his staff. So like,
I mean that's one reason I really try not to say, and this guy needs to be fired. He's awful,
right?
Because you're talking people. And you're not talking Gus the only one. You've got all these assistant coaches, and maybe the new coordinator comes in and likes this guy, that guy, but probably not. So
that's usually how it works,
right? Yeah. If you're going to bring in a guy, give him a chance by bringing in his own people,
right? You don't say, "Hey, you're going to come in. This is your defensive line coach, the linebackers coach,"
which goes back to you don't bring in a new GM and say, by the way, this is what you've got. So that's why they're in such a not disarray. I mean, they've got a vision of where they're going. It's just one that most people don't agree with. But defensively, they need something. But to do something else, you need better corners. Kenny Moore's really good. Jalen Jones, I'm up and down on him. Samuel Womack, the more he played, you saw good and you saw bad, and you saw he's a waiver guy.
You saw why he was a waiver guy.
Right. Guys are doggone it. Guys
like Kenny Moore's don't fall out of the trees.
Right.
Like the guy that you pick up on waivers and become a pro.
There were a couple times you said, hey, maybe this is Kenny Moore 2.0.
Gosh, they don't happen that often.
Right.
Maybe this is Jack Doyle.
Right. And there was a reason that, God love him, that Mark Lewinsky was available, was working out on his own when they needed it. So always keep that in mind. But they need help. That's why I say corner, safety. Julian Blackmon, he won't be back, will he? I mean, I don't see how.
I don't see how they can. Like he wasn't what you expected, taking a next step in his career. That's why they gave him a 1-year deal,
and
right?
He kept mentioning, I'm playing out of position, so he wasn't real happy.
No,
but that defensively, they've got to do something different, and to do like let's say more press coverage and zone, then you need players who can stand up and play that. And right now, they don't have that.
If you look at some milestones the Colts reached in their overtime victory over the Jacksonville Jaguars to close out the season, how happy were you to see that clock hit 0 and things tied, Chap? And we get more Colts football.
We were talking when they had a chance, when Jacksonville tied it at 17-17. We were PO'd that Peterson didn't go for 2 to avoid the possibility
this exact scenario. Yes.
So, yeah, I'm not as energetic as Irsay was on fighting hard, winning in overtime. I'd rather win in overtime than lose in overtime. And it would have been so appropriate for this season. That game ended in a tie.
It would have been. Yes.
So.
But that's why Colts fans loved Lovie Smith for scoring the touchdown and going for 2. So we didn't get overtime, and that got them C.J. Stroud, to be fair. So I think that Texans fans have forgiven him for losing out on the number 1 pick.
No sooner does Jacksonville get home, the next day they fire.
They fire Doug Peterson, the Super Bowl champion head coach Doug Peterson. By the way,
that's as much as much lack of optimism as here.
Mhm.
Tennessee and
Tennessee.
and Jacksonville, I'm telling you.
And they're keeping Trent Baalke too, their general
And
manager.
I was told that
over and over and over again.
I was told by somebody I talked to in the organization.
He's
down
Chris
there
Ballard 1.0 down there.
Yeah, the difference is apparently he's not the best guy to buddy around with inside the building. But yeah, they're letting him
try to remake it
fix
again.
What he broke.
Okay,
which it's always a strange.
We'll see about that.
But again, the only way that it works down there is if Trevor Lawrence works.
Mm-hmm.
And right now, do you really know what he is?
You know, he's a pretty good player, but
he's probably won 40% of his starts.
Yeah, he's a fine player.
And on top of that, he's getting $275 million. It's like 50. Mm-hmm. He's like second or third highest paid player in the league.
How much does he contribute to that whole franchise? You know, that has been a perennial losing franchise. Does his attitude help or hurt that? You know, and how much does he counteract? Would it be worse without him there? Is kind of what I'm saying. Would it just fall into disarray? Those are questions that you have to answer if you're there.
How much more could it fall? They were 4-13 this year. I mean,
yep. Good point.
And I've always said it's worse to have a guy that you think's the guy,
mm-hmm.
because until you find out that he's not, so far these guys have wasted an 1,800-yard rushing season and a 1,400-yard rushing season, along with 30 rushing touchdowns from Taylor. So I don't know, but you look at the division and doggone, it's there. Houston did everything but say beat us,
mm-hmm.
and no one could do it.
Nope. So try to make it a game, but no one could. You mentioned Jonathan Taylor finished fourth in the NFL in rushing yards with 1,431 after running for 177 in that overtime win over the Jaguars on 34 carries. You had joked, don't give him 40, but they tried.
That's career high.
Yes, it is. They tried. 303 carries for the entire season, fifth in the NFL. We mentioned Josh Downs, who broke Marvin Harrison's record for catches in his first two seasons with the franchise, finished with 140. I think Marvin was at 137 or 138. I forget which one broke the
the only difference is obviously Marvin.
Fewer game?
I'm just saying the type of player he gives you the over-top stuff. And right now, Josh is more of the underneath stuff and running to the catch.
Zaire Franklin, 173 tackles, finished first in the NFL after getting 8 against the Jaguars, including the most important one of the game. You know, Zaire's been kind of with his feet to the fire the past couple of weeks, deservedly so.
He put his own feet to the fire.
He did, very much so. And then, but leading the NFL in tackles is good. Winning the game is good in spite of it being a game that didn't have any playoff implications. Like good plays that's what you want.
And he had a few more impactful plays. He had, was it 2 sacks? Was it?
He had 3.5 for the season.
Okay, and a lot more tackles for loss and all that. So he, if this had been a playoff team, his season would have been seen as a lot better.
If he hadn't honestly made a fool of himself on his podcast, then you would have viewed his season in a much, much different, much better light. But it's just such a harsh light that was shined based on kind of what we talked a little bit about last week and all that.
Well, then he got into
it's hard to be completely gung ho.
And then he got into a spitting match with Pat McAfee.
Yeah,
you're going to lose.
It's not a good match to get into. Right. You know what? Like I've said, like you can. This is a bad example. Actually, because I don't think Pat matches the level of that I'm going against. I mainly use this for arguing with trolls on Twitter. Like I say, you can get in a mud wrestling contest with a pig, but at the end of the day, even if you win, the pig's going to like it, and you're going to be covered in mud.
Right.
Like exactly. And I don't think Pat. That's not the kind of guy Pat is. But it's like you can get in a fight with Pat McAfee if you want. But you're going to come out on the other side not looking so good at the end of the day, even if you make some good points along the way.
That's what I was going to say. I go back.
And that's the point I'm trying to make. So maybe I should have just said that.
I go back to when Bill Polian got in his 32-minute rant with Jay Moore over Edgerrin James. Bill Polian had 98% of the facts on his side, and nobody cared.
Right. Doesn't matter.
Because it doesn't matter. Mm-hmm. And one thing for Zaire, I noticed on Monday, I think he put out a
yes,
and I'll paraphrase it wrong.
Yes,
but people learn. We make mistakes, and people learn from it. I will learn from my mistakes.
Yes,
good for him. That's accountability.
Yes, it is. So
and I
props
would
to
be
him.
surprised if there's a podcast.
Right. It could happen.
Not ours, but his.
No, his talking about all
Because
that.
we don't go.
Yes.
We don't talk about the 4-11 Giants when we play them.
Whether it's Bill Polian getting into an argument about Edgerrin James or Bill Tobin getting into an argument with Mel Kiper in 1994,
Who the hell is
famously.
Mel Kiper?
Exactly. Very famously. Maybe set off ESPN's draft coverage to become what it was, or at least was one of the tipping points.
It didn't hurt Mel Kiper's career.
Not at all. Not at all. Quentin Nelson named first team All-Pro again. He's been a Pro Bowler every year of his career, all 7 years. So props to Quentin for that. Alec Pierce ending the season with 22.3 yards per catch and 86.5% of his catches going for first downs. Both of them first in the NFL. Once again, where would the Colts be without Alec Pierce this year?
He was second in the league, tied for second with 40-yard receptions.
Yep, that's
the only one that had
good.
more was Jamar Chase.
That guy's pretty.
He had 8.
He's making a lot,
and Alec had 7.
So I think, like you mentioned earlier, people may be a little bit disappointed. Like people would wanted this maybe from Alec Pierce's rookie year because they wanted better quarterback play around him. I would say, first of all, Pierce was a third round pick, I believe he was, or was a second round pick. He was a second round pick. Like, and there were a bunch of receivers taken before him. You need a year or two to develop. I would understand maybe if you wanted this the year before, but again, the quarterback play just wasn't there. This was the first year he actually had the ability to put forth a season like this, and he showed. Yeah, this is why he was drafted. This is why he's an NFL player. And now he can build on this, hopefully, and just take another step next year.
And this was the second best average in franchise history.
Pretty darn good.
I think Roger Carr had 25-6 1 year.
Yeah. So I'm going to close with my thought. We don't need to cover anything else on my rundown, but just one more thing was just like how close are the Colts? And I'm not going to give you my thoughts on that. I'm going to give you Joe Flacco's thoughts on that because I asked him.
That was vintage stuff.
I asked him that question in post game because I was like, you've been around a bunch of teams, and the Ravens, they're kind of playoff teams over the years. You know the difference between a playoff team and not a playoff team. I was like, Joe, this team's going to finish like 1 or 2 games out of the playoffs. How close are teams like this, that are 8-9, 8-8 throughout the year to really being able to be a difference maker in the NFL? And for a while, he kind of rambled a little bit, as he does sometimes when he's answering a question, because
he's thinking he's trying to figure out what he wants to say.
Yeah, he's trying to focus in because he has a lot of thoughts and a lot of good thoughts, I think, on the issue. Like if he was doing a podcast on this topic, he would be a fantastic podcast host about sharing information. But anyway, he got to this at the end of his answer. When you're 8-9, that's probably a ton of spots where you could look and convince yourself that we were almost there. I don't necessarily think that's the right mindset. I don't think we should be trying to trick ourselves into thinking that we're almost there. I think we should acknowledge, yeah, we're almost there, but we're not there. I think when you acknowledge that, you free yourself up to get better and to take that next step. And I think that is such a great attitude to have instead of the attitude that we're almost there. And to be honest, that's, I think, where Colts fans are frustrated with Jim Irsay, is he's focusing on we're almost there. We're almost there. And he doesn't have that mindset, I think, that Joe Flacco exuded in that answer, that we're not there yet. And you need to acknowledge that and free yourself up to get better, to take the next step. I don't know. Maybe I'm overreacting to kind of the dichotomy between those two answers a little bit, because Irsay, to be fair to him, at the beginning of his whole Twitter post, talked all about being disappointed and all that stuff and being not good enough. But I still thought that there was a little bit of difference between the two. And I thought that answer from Joe was very apt to how the Colts need to address this 2025 offseason, Mike.
Right, because I can sit here and say, boy, if JT hadn't dropped that ball in Denver before the goal line.
Mm-hmm.
But keep in mind that had they beaten Denver,
they still wouldn't have made the playoffs.
Let's take it that way. And then if they don't get humiliated against the Giants, they still needed things to happen.
Right.
That's what you don't want. You want this. I've got to mention his name, Carson Wentz.
Whee!
You want it where with 2 games to go, you've got a 98% chance of getting in. It's not on anybody else but yourself.
Right.
And then you wet the bed against the Raiders, and then you really do more than that against Jacksonville. That's on you.
Mm-hmm.
But I totally agree with Flacco where the danger is, boy, we're almost like last year. Well, no, in this past offseason, look how close they were, 4th and 1. Look how close they were to winning the division.
Right.
But you still had the problems. You still had issues. And if you buy into how close you are, then you run it back with $160 million on your own guys, and you don't really bring in competition for the rest of the franchise.
Mm-hmm.
So they're not close. Yeah, they're close to being close.
Close to being close.
I don't think that means you're very close. So, and please, let's not take consolation as, it's really bad in Tennessee. And what, you want to be in Cleveland?
Is that your bar? Is that your standard?
Right. Is that, you're not as bad as 6 other franchises? No. And that's where, if you're not careful, this expectation gets lowered. The bar gets lowered. And before you know it, the bar is, 8-9. We fought our rear ends off to win an overtime game. And last year was 9-8 and 4th and 1, who knows? So you need to get back to where in the 2000s, doggone it, the expectation was we're going to win the division at least.
At least.
We're going to fall out of bed and win 10 games. Now,
Right.
you had the elite quarterback, which you don't have here. You don't have Andrew Luck here. But that shouldn't lower the bar. And that's why I say, and again, I don't care who all they add. If the quarterback doesn't work, it ain't going to work. But you need to approach it that this quarterback's going to work because he has to, and we're going to add 3 or 4 pieces of difference makers, not necessarily Daniel Hunter level player, but guys are going to come in and play. And don't be fooled by the fact that you came this close to almost making it.
Well, we've topped an hour right now on this Colts Blue Zone podcast. I want to give us
We
enough.
could have gone on and on,
Yes.
but I want to beat the rush hour going home.
I want to give us enough to talk about next week. And since Chris Ballard's probably going to talk between now and then, I'm sure we'll find plenty. So for Mike Chappell, you can read all his work online, fox59.com, cbs4indy.com. I'm Dave Griffiths. Follow Mike on Twitter at mchappell51. I'm at DaveG_sports. And I do hope this goes out to you since our producer, Matt Adams, is not here. I have every confidence that it will. We'll see you next week on the Colts Blue Zone podcast.